Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.
It was a place that invited creativity and invited openness, and I see it still that way.
All of us here at this table played a role in the evolution of Austin.
What will Austin look like 15 years from now? Let's hope that it will be more affordable than it is.
Good evening, I'm Judy Maggio. Tonight on Decibel, a history-making conversation with the people who've led our city for the past 40 years. Austin's mayors. They provide a unique perspective on the city's past, present, and future. A few footnotes before we get started. We lost Mayor Gus Garcia, the city's first Latino mayor, in 2018. We'll have a tribute to him later in the program. Austin's only female mayor, Carol Keaton, is facing some health challenges, but we will share some of her contributions as well. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here this evening. I want to quickly introduce everyone, and you're seated in chronological order to make it easy for me to remember who served when. We have Mayor Ron Mullen, Mayor Frank Cooksey, Mayor Bruce Todd. I'm going to call you Senator Kirk Watson, as your state senator now.
Appropriate.
Mayor Will Wynn, Mayor Lee Leffingwell, and our current mayor, Steve Adler. Most of us have been here a long time. And you know, old Austin folks often say, oh, I miss this, oh, I miss that. So what do you guys miss the most about the old Austin? And what do you appreciate the most about the new Austin, modern day Austin?
Looking back in the period of the 1950s, I have a warm feeling for that time, because it was the time when I was in the University of Texas and just graduated from Austin High School. And the town was growing. It went to the huge population of about 135,000. But I really believe that every person who's lived in Austin has a favorite time that they identify as the time that they feel like Austin was just the greatest at that time. I represented Stevie Ray Vaughan at one point as his lawyer, and so I have.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did, and I have some real warm feelings about our music people in Austin. But they're great, wonderful things. Everybody here has memories about what they love about Austin.
Stevie Ray a good guy?
Was what?
Was Stevie Ray Vaughan a good guy?
He was a wonderful guy. And I went to the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland with him. And that was one of the highlights of being able to represent Stevie Ray Vaughan. But, he was a wonderful guy, and it was sad that he died in that helicopter crash.
Well, I sponsored the renaming, or the co-naming, actually. We didn't rename West 2nd Street, but we gave it the co-name of Willie Nelson Boulevard, which you can use either one now, and of course the post office will deliver the mail. And right after that, a private group got together and had commissioned a statue of Willie Nelson, which is right across the street from the City Hall on 2nd Street in front of some hotel there. I forget what the name of it is. It's the W Hotel.
And next to the new home of Austin City Limits, I would like to say.
We were getting ready to do the unveiling of the statue.
Willie, you are a treasure and a blessing. And you are our friend. And I know I speak for everyone here and for millions of others from all over the world when I say, Willie, we love you.
Of course, Willie was the guest of honor. And he kept insisting, it was in April, he kept insisting that it be on April 20th and that the actual event occur at 4:20 p.m. in the afternoon. And I've always wondered why he wanted that, why he wanted it that way.
Nope,
I
no
think
idea.
I've subsequently figured it out some, but at the time I really didn't know why he wanted that, but it didn't matter to me. If that's what he wants to do, 4:20 in the afternoon is good for me.
When I listen to people talk about their favorite moments in Austin, I hear a spirit that kind of runs through all of those, and it involves creativity. I mean, here we are talking about music the way we are, and Austin always kind of had that spirit of it was a special place. It was a green place. It was a pretty place. It was a place that invited creativity and invited openness to the way people could think about things. I mean, the Armadillo World Headquarters, which I didn't get to experience that because it had already closed by the time we got here, but that was a place where the rednecks and the hippies both were at the same time. It was an inviting place that had creativity, and I see it still that way. I think the fact that we are a focal point in a worldwide knowledge and information economy is an outgrowth of a place that enjoyed creativity and can continue that creativity. And so that spirit is still there. I think it's fun to reminisce about the reasons we stuck. But if we stop and think about it, it's still attracting people for the very same reasons we all ended up staying.
I think that's real true. And I put a little bit of a twist on it with the creativity because I think it's also that in this city, taking risks is rewarded,
Right?
And failing is not punished the way that it's punished in other cities, and I think that helps make this a creative place. So when people
Keeping it weird.
keep Austin weird, to me is exactly that. This is a city where it's okay to try things. It's okay early on to change the color of your hair. This is the city where you can wear a thong and go bicycle down Congress Avenue, but it's also in the ideas. I get asked a lot now that South by Southwest has passed 30 years now to comment on the difference, how South by has changed in that period of time. And I go back to what you say, and I say, in the most important ways, it hasn't. 2 years ago, it was about an incredible set of creatives, artists, musicians, that were wonderful, but really couldn't get out of the local market to make it regionally and nationally. So we created in this community this place where creatives could meet record labels and then be able to get exposure and distribution. And that's what South by is today, except it's interactive. And the creatives are the entrepreneurs that are coming up with new platforms. The record labels are the venture capitalists, and they're looking for the same kind of distribution. We are the city where Willie Nelson came not only to reinvent country music, but who listened to country music. This is the city where dinner and a movie got reinvented with Alamo. It's where the grocery store was reinvented. So while things change in this city, I think I agree with you that what is core here has been the same, and I think that's why we have more internet high-tech startups per capita than any other city, because it's built into this culture of trying something, iterating new ideas.
If I'd have called my dad and said, I've got this great idea, I'm gonna open me a grocery store and I'm gonna sell bean sprouts and granola bars, he would have said, son, that is
package them yourself.
Yeah, that's right. He had said, son, that is a weird idea. But of course, in this town, it was nurtured and that's, it may not be grocery stores, but it's something else that's weird. It's something else that's different, but it's creative. And we develop an energy around that.
I was brought here. I came here in 1966, and I would not want to go back to that for anything in the world. I think that was like a Waco. You didn't have opportunity.
Nothing against Waco.
You didn't have opportunity. Well, a lot of folks in Austin wanted it to be like Waco. Don't bring corporations, send out letters and stop it. Don't build roads. Don't build buildings too tall. Well, I'm just saying, The city's great because it has a balance between environment, which did extremely well, and business. But it was a chore for a lot of us that wanted, and what I'm saying is this. I said in campaigns, in arguments against people that were trying to stop everything, I want my children to be able to live in Austin, Texas when they graduate. I want my grandchildren to be here. And I said that over and over. Because when you had only the state and the university, and you could sell shoes, and I could sell insurance, and there just wasn't a whole lot of opportunity. My greatest thing is right now, because my grandchildren live here, my children live here, they're married, they have jobs, and I have the third great-grandchild coming. I couldn't ask for anything better than that. I don't want to go back to some old time and think about it. I love where I am right now.
I agree with you, and I kind of, in my own mind, I put Austin into three historic eras. There was before the 60s, that Austin, the one you talked about with the university, and the state government, and the car dealers was basically what we had here. And then we changed when the hippies came to town in the late 60s and early 70s with their creativity, they changed the city again. And they've been a political force in this city for 30 or 40 years. But now we're beginning to go through another transitioning from the hippies to the hipsters. These are the high-tech people, the people that walk around with their shirt tails hanging out and their thong shoes, but have made this city into an economic powerhouse. And I've said this many times when I was mayor, a good quality of life begins with a good job.
Absolutely.
And that's what economic development does for you. And a lot of people resist that, especially when we were going through a transition in the way we did economic incentive agreements. And I'm sure several of us here have dealt with that. It was a hard sell for a long time to realize that you have to actively recruit companies to come here. And you have to have things in place that make it palatable to the taxpayer, but it was necessary then, and maybe someday it'll be necessary again.
Lee Cook was a pivotal person in city government for more than a decade. First as a council member in the late 70s, then serving as mayor. He also led the local Chamber of Commerce. Cook wasn't able to make our roundtable, but we recently talked about his time in office.
First, downtown revitalization. We started that in '77, and it ebbed and flowed. A lot of people, said you're never going to change. But at the end of the day, thanks to the efforts of so many councils and mayors and also private citizens, look at where downtown is today in 2018. It is phenomenal. Second is sitting around having a bunch of beers in '85 and having the chamber staff come up with Live Music Capital of the World, which was in Billboard magazine in July of '86. And then having a meeting at the Continental Club in February of '86, bringing everybody together about bringing a new music seminar to Austin, and the decision not to do that by the guys in New York, and South by Southwest is created. And I think that has been an iconic event over the 30 years, maybe the most iconic event worldwide that has taken Austin from being Austin, Texas, to Austin, Texas, a very significant city growing into the world stage. In 1985, we were basically still a city of government and a city of education and a city of service to support those two sectors. And the SRI report that came out that was commissioned by the Chamber said we should branch out, recruit the creative class, and expand into R&D, film, music, tourism, software development, and look at where we are today.
You presided over, I believe, the longest public hearing in the city's history. Can you tell us about that?
It was in June of 1990, and it was a big environmental fight about developing Barton Creek. And the city staff had worked tirelessly to create this PUD that was before the city council. And we listened to hearing that went on all night long.
My greatest disappointment is that we weren't able to summon enough civic responsibility to hold back the onslaught of the developers. Amen, John Henry.
Went on, started, I forget how many hours it was, 18 or 22 hours before I said stop, because we're just hearing repetitive comments. Well, we voted 7-0 to decline that, and it was a terrible mistake. It was a bad mistake on my part, it was a bad mistake on the council members' parts, and here's why. Because the work that the city staff had done miraculously was really going to set what Barton Creek would be. Once we turned it down, the developers went to the state legislature and all bets were off and they got everything they wanted, and it was a big shot to the foot for the environmentalists, and it was a big shot to the foot for local politics.
What do you miss most about the Austin that you knew when you arrived here? And what do you really treasure about Austin as we start 2019?
I don't miss anything about Austin 1970 when I came here as a young 24, 25-year-old captain, single, glad to be alive. It was a nice town, but I think the Austin today, and I'm way out of it, I'm just a private citizen, and I love the way Austin is, even with the traffic, even with the environmental issues, even with all the debates that go on every day, even with the homeless issue, even with affordability. We are a great place in the true perspective. We get so many accolades from people outside of Austin that are looking at Austin and comparing us to every other city in this country. We will be on the world stage in the 21st century, period.
The mayors before and after Lee Cook agree our city is poised to continue playing a key role in the 21st century. Here's more of our conversation. I want to pull back the curtain a little bit. Tell us about the inner workings of City Hall as mayor. Do you have some anecdotes?
I could tell you about the thermostat battles.
That goes on in most households too.
Well, what I remember, sorry.
Well, it's real quick, but some of us like to keep the room a little bit cooler than others. And so there was a thermostat right behind the dais, right off the side of the dais. And some people would kind of sneak back there and turn it one way or the other. And we were doing this yo-yo all day long of the temperature going up and going down. And so finally I said, what we need to do is put a lock on that thermostat, set it early in the morning, and then nobody can change it. Nobody can sneak back there and change it. And so that's what happened.
Regardless of moving forward with this.
There's a bit of a disconnect between, the accountability of being a mayor, which is great, which is we all should want, right? The elections and the media cover and all that. But then the actual authority to do something about what you're being held accountable for, right? And so people think of a mayor as, being
all powerful.
Yeah, all powerful,
and appropriately so as the chief executive.
Exactly,
with executive powers.
But the fact,
in all instances.
Right. The fact is, the mayor of Austin is in the legislative branch. He or she is the sort of first among equals, but in the legislative branch, and then the city manager is a chief executive, and hires and fires everybody, and and executes. Hopefully
CEO
will
duties,
will of the mayor and council, but most folks on the street sort of don't understand that nuance. In a sense, it's actually more work than just having the raw authority to go do something and be done with it.
Well, I would argue that while it's more work, it's better work.
I don't. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's.
You have to get the consensus before you're able to do anything. You just can't order something done. Now, you can talk to the city manager and say, here's what I would like to do, and he and she will come back to you and tell you why that's a bad idea sometimes, or they'll get it done. And I think a lot of that, during my tenure, a lot of that happened. The manager would hear me out, hear the council members out, and behind the scenes get it done. Not in a secret kind of way, but just in a straightforward kind of way that you have to do when you're running a big business, and Austin is that.
Citizens, ordinary citizens, they do have this image of a mayor as being the chief executive.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, there are about 10 people that the mayor can actually hire on his own staff and 1 or 2 other folks. So the constitution of government is done by the city manager in terms of personnel. And personnel, frankly, is almost everything. If you don't have good people, and that's why when we sit around here and talk about everything we've done, really, we ought to be saying we in the sense of the city staff and everybody else that has been a part of this, and many community leaders that we interact with as well. So we've got to give credit where credit is due, and that is to our city staff. And I have to say, we had some wonderful city staff when I was mayor, and I've appreciated them very, very much.
The mayor and council are there to set the policy of the city based upon their election. And the professional staff is there to carry that out and to advise when certain things won't work. And the 2 biggest times that when you pull back that curtain that doesn't work is either with when the policy folks are at war with the management, and there were times that we know about where that occurred, or where one side wants to do the other side's job. Right?
A lot of that goes on.
That's right. The council wants to become assistant city managers and actually carry out those specific roles, as opposed to setting, as you said it, the goals and then saying go and get it done. And as long as we have this form of government, there's always going to be that tension and that difficulty, and it becomes harder, if you don't get hold of it, it becomes harder to wrestle it down, when it really festers up.
I have a little lightning round for you, and then a couple of final questions. Lightning round, I'm just going to say something, and you guys can react to it. The 3-minute rule.
I started it. Let me say that first. And is it still there?
Yes, but it's not strictly enforced, and there are variations allowed.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Why did you start it?
Because I saw the previous mayor let anybody talk as long as they wanted to. And one time on the boat races, a lady spoke for 45 minutes on the boat races. And then the newspaper started calling us because we were getting out at night at 2 o'clock in the morning because meetings were lasting so long, the Bat Cave. That was the deal. And so I met with every council member before we went into office, and I said, do you want to be called the Bat Cave, or would you allow me to have a set 3-minute time limit? I will enforce it with friends. I will enforce it with anybody. And they said, go for it.
And to be clear, the variation is not to allow people to talk for longer than 3 minutes. There are certain situations where speakers are not given 3 minutes to be able to talk.
That's good.
The next word in the lightning round is traffic.
Oh.
I tell people. When you're
We're going to talk about traffic.
You're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic, right? You're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic. You're in your car, probably alone in your car, and you're griping about being stuck on 360, and you're alone in your car.
I want everybody else to take the bus.
But what other choice do you have day in and day out?
Live closer to where you work, shop, play, work out,
Well, people
worship,
can't
go to
afford to
school.
do that anymore.
Well, but if we change our land use patterns, you have more mix of uses in all parts of the city, and there's more services in neighborhoods and more services everywhere.
Well, if you had all government employees, federal, state, city, county, school, carpool, takes care of all the problems. Just taking away those 18% or so folk or cars by having carpooling, your traffic will go at posted speed limits.
Should something have been done like 50 years ago or 40 years ago that would have
built more infrastructure and...
Well, I agree with what Will said about changing land use patterns. I agree with that. But I really agree with a comment that I heard from the guy who runs the Mobility Authority in the DFW area. And he says, what you have to do is you can't do this thing, one thing, and you can't do this one thing. You have to do 5 things at once. And that's what they've done at DFW. They've done everything at once. They've done roads, they've done transit, they've done pedestrian facilities. So everybody gets buy-in, and they've been very successful at it.
When you're growing as fast as we're growing in this city, you are never going to catch up with transportation issues. And you better not tell people you're going to, because that creates a failure of expectations. So I think that it's a thing that the Mobility Authority has to address on a regional basis, as you've said, Kirk. But one problem we have with that Mobility Authority is that we don't have much power as a city on that particular entity, and I don't think they look kindly toward the city of Austin.
Carol Keaton has the distinction of being the only woman to serve as mayor of Austin. In fact, she was leading the city when I arrived way back in 1978. A true trailblazer, Carol started her long stint in politics on the Austin School Board. Then in 1977, she was elected mayor of Austin and served until 1983. She remains the only woman to hold the post. Then known as Carol Keaton McClellan, she was at the helm of the city as it started slowly moving from a sleepy college town to a music mecca and eventually a high-tech center.
It is great to be an American, it's great to be a Texan, it's great to be the first woman comptroller.
She went on to hold state office as Railroad Commissioner and Texas Comptroller. Carol Keaton has continued to serve our community just as the other mayors have after they left office. Here's the final part of our roundtable.
If you could talk to the Austin mayor 50 years ago, what would you warn him about? What would you tell him? And it was a male.
So if we were going back in time, and I would think, what is it that I would want someone to have done then to put us in a better place now? On mobility, it would be to acquire the right-of-way for us to be able to have a high-capacity transit system that's going to be hard now to create with retrofitting that into a system. So I would say create that obtain the right-of-way necessary for that to be able to be created in the future. And then on affordability, it's tough now to retrofit mixed income opportunities in a city that's grown, and in retrospect, looking backwards, I think that if we could have done a better job. I mean, hindsight is 20/20. As the city was growing and as things were changing, to create pockets and opportunities, again, for mixed income and affordable housing to be created in the city. Because both those two things are just so hard to come back in after the fact and try to create.
You're laughing, Will?
Well, kind of the same thing. I think you have to have the mindset of long-range planning and building the infrastructure that the city needs, whether it be water, electricity, transportation. You've got to build it before you need it. You've got to begin to build it at least. Mayor Cooksey mentioned that he had the idea for State Highway 130. And when that was built, it was in the middle of nowhere, and everybody actually made fun of it. So what do we need a highway like this out here? But now we need it, and now it's even congested at times.
It's called planning.
It's called planning, and that's what you have to do. It has to be long-range planning, and you have to have elected leadership that has the political courage to push forward on major projects like that.
What would you tell the mayor 50 years ago?
I just say, well, Mayor, just think about when you first came here, and it's probably 2.5 times the size it was then. Well, it's going to be 2.5 times bigger in about 50 years, and so just never lose track of that thought. That it's just in a capitalistic free society, attractive cities attract people, and it's going to be a long time before Austin's not an attractive city. And so it's just to mirror Steve and Lee's comment. You can't plan enough, and you can't try to finance infrastructure enough, and you can't deliver on infrastructure enough, and or changes of land use patterns and all that stuff, because you're going to wake up one day and the town's going to be 2.5 times the size it was when you moved here, and shame on us if we don't plan for that.
I would tell the mayor two things that are truths about Austin of the future. One is it's going to grow just the way it was talked about, and since we're going back 50 years, and it's going to change dramatically in terms of how that growth occurs, because it's going to become a focal point in a worldwide economy. And the second thing I would say that is a truth is we are going to judge you harshly with 20/20 hindsight. Because that is the Austin way. And as part of that 20/20 hindsight, as we sit here today dealing with some of the things that Mayor Adler has talked about, affordability, which didn't start here. I mean, we all have dealt with it. Again, that's another one of those things we stand on each other's shoulders with regard to. But affordability, gentrification, traffic, those are all related. And I would try to communicate that dealing with things like traffic will make a difference on gentrification 50 years from now. And affordability 50 years from now. And so my message would be, take that into account now so you'll make a difference in a real way, so that we won't be addressing it in the kind of almost crisis type mentality. But I think it's also important for us to not just talk 50 years ago, but talk to the community about right now and 50 years from now. And that's clearly the lesson here, which is we ought to be learning from some of these mistakes. If we're going to play the game of 20/20 hindsight, let's apply it to what it's going to look like 50 years from now when we're making decisions and we're debating some of the very same debates that occurred 50 and 40 and 30 years ago.
Let's see, 50 years ago, the mayor was Travis LaRue. He was not elected. He was chosen by the 5 council members. And Roy,
You knew that off the top of your
Roy
head?
Butler was elected.
I moved here 50 years ago. And then Roy Butler was elected in 71, became the first directly elected mayor in modern times. Let me answer it just a little bit philosophically. I remember, not very clearly, a couple of years ago, I was stopped behind a car, getting off Mopac, go home. And the car in front of me had 2 bumper stickers. One bumper sticker said, "Keep Austin Weird," and the other side says, "Soccer Mom." Now, what I tell the mayor 50 years ago is pay attention to that person, because that sort of expresses the diversity that we talked about at this meeting, of opinion about what ought to be done, what people ought to be spending time on, all that sort of thing. And if you can pay attention to those kind of folks that have that kind of difference of daily activities in their life, you'll produce a pretty good city. And I think, by and large, that's been done, and it's a pretty good city.
Mayor Cooksey.
I think at that time, 50 years ago, you can't imagine, or you have some degree of inability to imagine what Austin would be today. So the best you can do as a human being, a real human being, is to try to think as far in advance as you can and do the planning that you think is necessary 30 years in advance. And that is difficult. First of all, I would tell him, get the legislature and the federal government to change their funding mechanisms so that there's going to be enough money available to do the things in terms of building transportation infrastructure that you will need. And frankly, the federal government and the state have not kept up. And that's one of the problems we've had in obtaining enough funding to do the projects that we actually did plan.
The funding has been there. Absolutely has been there. And this community, with their hard-headedness against building roads, went to the state and said, we don't want your money. A council member went there and said, no, don't give Austin the money. And they said, get your act together and come back. Now, it doesn't matter how good your plans are. If you have folks in the community that go and do that kind of stuff and stop the plan, then it doesn't matter what you tell that person.
I actually do have one final question.
Uh-oh.
Austin in one word. One word for Austin.
Spirited.
Diverse.
I call it wonderful. I love it here.
Optimistic.
Terminal democracy. That's 2 words.
It's okay.
Just use terminal.
Magical.
There you go.
Mayor Cooksey, you have the final word.
Global.
Remember, he was on TV saying magic.
Well, I think it's a magical place too. I think that everybody around this table loves this city.
Yep.
With all their heart, despite the traffic and the affordability issues and the divisions in the community. It is a wonderful place to call home. And it's been a joy and a pleasure to sit down with all of you and reminisce and look towards the future. And thank you for sharing those experiences with our viewing audience tonight and with me.
As we mentioned earlier, Mayor Gus Garcia died in 2018 at the age of 84. I had the chance to chat with him several years ago about the role he played in Austin history.
It was just an opportunity. I had always told people that I did not want to be mayor because I went to the school board and to the council basically to represent the Hispanic community. That was basically my job. And I never, ever, got into fights with people in other ethnic groups. But basically, I was a Hispanic representative. And here, all of a sudden, I was representing African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, whites. Oh, I had to kind of relearn how to serve a broader community. But I tell you one thing, the people of Austin are great. If I was going to run again, I would want to run in an environment like Austin. Because people here can argue with you, they can talk for days, but they're nice, they're kind people, okay? The reality is, if you talk to them, they just want to do the right thing. And I appreciate that.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution and laws of the United States.
The Constitution and laws of the United States.
And of this state.
And of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Te felicito.
Gracias.
When Gus Garcia was sworn in, he brought a different perspective than past mayors because as a Latino, he endured discrimination in both housing and business. He was pulled into politics when asked to serve on the city's newly formed Human Relations Commission in 1967. His community involvement eventually led to a spot on the Austin School Board and later the Austin City Council. Gus Garcia loved this city, and after his passing, this community had the chance to share their love for him.
This ain't no crazy dream, I know that is real. You're someone else's love now, you're not mine.
It's fitting and proper that we are here today recognizing Gus Garcia, since Gus Garcia is a towering figure, an historical figure in our home, the city of Austin. The entire city, every Austinite benefited and benefits from his courage, his vision, and his service.
And for me, Mayor Garcia was such an incredible mentor. I have never known this city where Gus Garcia was not involved in public service. Over 50 years of public service for our city. In informal ways, but in formal ways that began in 1967.
I wish Gus was here today to see this crowd. He would never stop bragging about it. Gus was probably the best advocate for the quality of education and the importance of bilingual education in the Austin School District. I am so proud that I was part of that, and so proud that I made the motion to make Gus Garcia the first Hispanic elected official in Austin. Thank you, family, for putting up with all of us.
Since kindergarten to today, in my senior year at the University of Texas, I was never greeted with a "Hi, Tony, how are you?" but instead, a "Tony, how are your studies? What is your GPA?" But the conversation always ended with, "Your mommy and I are very, very proud of you."
What was he like as a disciplinarian? Well, he was never physical, all right? He did something way worse. He lectured us for, and like the first 15 seconds, he would concentrate on like what you did wrong. And then the next hour and 15 minutes, he would just riff off on like, history and, that Victor was like, "I wish he'd just take a belt to us and just." It was a very peaceful and tranquil house. A lot of music played in the house, and he played those records, and those are very, very good memories.
In 2010, long after his days as mayor were behind him, Gus accepted my urging to come sing with an accordion band, the Move Group. Loved being kidded about his life in politics and smiled each time we reminded him that he had finally found an honorable career. The Move Band will perform one of the numbers from that CD. The band will play the instruments at low volume so that the mayor's voice, strong voice, can be heard on the speakers.
It's been said the more we learn about our past, the better prepared we are for the future. With around 150 people moving to Austin every day, this region is rapidly changing. Blair Waltman-Alexson has the forecast from some of the people on the front lines planning for the future.
We are focusing on iconic Austin this month.
We spent a lot of time this month talking about our favorite historical places in Austin, but I'm not from Austin, and yeah, I know I missed the era when it was still cool. So instead of looking back at places I didn't experience, I wanted to look forward to the future of Austin.
That makes no sense at all. No, let me start again. So,
I figured a good place to start was with the city demographer, Ryan Robinson.
What will Austin look like 15 years from now? I think it'll certainly be bigger physically. It'll have a whole lot more people in it. It will be more diverse. And let's hope that it will be more affordable than it is. We have gone through what I would call foundational changes in the last few years. As a metro, as a full metropolitan region, we're above 2.2 million folks. We are beginning to see what the urban geographers call multinucleation. And what I mean by that is the region is breaking into big sections.
And those big sections are seeing the most growth. Last year, the suburbs surrounding Austin grew faster than the city itself, but most employment is still centrally located.
So what does that mean? A lot of people coming in from the suburbs to the jobs that are still in the core. To my mind, that argues for serious regional transportation and land use planning. You talk about housing affordability, gentrification, and transportation. To my mind, transportation is the key.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, this is also a transportation story. Robinson predicts that Austin's population will hit the 1 million mark by 2020, and the 5-county metro area around Austin will see more than double that. Numbers like that put us on par with cities like Dallas, Philadelphia, and San Diego, all places with a robust public transportation system.
Next up, action item, approval of a resolution accepting the Project Connect Vision Plan.
There are plans to expand public transit. Cap Metro is currently working on Project Connect, a regional transit plan that would link Austin to several suburbs. But how do you build for the future when you're already working to catch up with the present population?
The answer is yes, we should and could be able to keep up and even be ahead of the game.
That's Todd Hemmingson, Executive Vice President of Planning and Development for Cap Metro. And part of his job is making sure 10 years from now, you can still get around town.
As we get into the 2 million, 4 million people over the next 20 years, we just can't continue to be dependent, as we have been, on the automobile.
Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously 6-0.
In December, the board of directors here at Capital Metro approved the vision plan. That really gave us a big step forward in terms of setting the high-level vision of where we want to be over the next 10 to 20 years. And the next steps that are coming up is to dig into the details. We can't do it alone. It's got to be coordinated with the cities, the counties, all collaborating to come up with a comprehensive approach. Even the private sector, now has gotten more into the game, so to speak, with the scooters and bikes and so on. All of those pieces need to be thought through as a system. For us to grow, we will need new funding sources. That is one important factor.
Funding means a citywide vote in 2020, and that may be a tough sell. While Austin did recently pass a massive transportation bond, it's mostly being used to repair roads and sidewalks. The last major bond that would have funded a light rail failed in 2014.
It's a challenge for sure, and that's one of the hardest things that planners have to do, I think, is try to get people to think 5, 10, 15 years out into the future when it's human nature to think about, what's happening tomorrow.
The future of transportation could even help preserve communities. Remember earlier when we talked about areas outside Austin growing rapidly? Some of that growth is being driven by people being priced out of the city core.
There will continue to be tremendous pressures on Austin neighborhoods if we continue to grow at the rate that we're growing.
This is Elizabeth Mueller. She worked on a gentrification study commissioned by the City Council. It identified Austin's most vulnerable neighborhoods, dubbed the Eastern Crescent. These are areas that have historically been communities of color, but now those long-term residents are being pushed out.
It's important also to think about where displaced people go. We do have a large number of jobs downtown. All of that makes it more valuable living close in. So if we had transportation connecting those things, then that would, I think, reduce some of the pressure to live downtown. We've been growing very quickly for a long time, and we've been growing in our inequity at the same time. So it's important to think about how are we somehow deepening that inequity as we grow, and how can we change that?
Mueller's team had some suggestions for the City Council on how to keep Austin affordable: emergency rental assistance, buying land, and tenant protections. But the key thing needed for each strategy is community input.
Where there was some way for the community to stay engaged with that as it unfolded. It's a really important part of the process.
Cities used to be for everyone. Well, now cities are more like economic centrifuges, right? If you can make it, great, but if you can't, you're going to be thrown out, And so that's, I think, a challenge. And again, it's not just Austin, it's every successful American city has got that challenge in front of them.
And for Austin, and pretty much every other major city, to tackle the issues of tomorrow, we have to start speaking up about them today.
I'm standing in a studio that helped put Austin on the map as the live music capital of the world, Studio 6A, the original home for Austin's City Limits.
So much incredible music has happened on that very stage that I can't help but get chills when I walk back in here.
I still feel that way. I love working in this building because I feel the good karma that comes out.
Whiskey River, take my mind.
First of all, how many people fit in this?
Well,
studio?
when the show started back in 1974, when Willie did the original pilot, I think we had as many as 600 or 700 people in here. And that continued for quite a few years. In
So
fact,
did they sit on the floor? What was the arrangement? And what's the original arrangement of the
the
studio?
original arrangement, we had bleacher seating that went all around the stage, wrapped around the backside of the stage.
Oh.
Now, we did that for the first couple, 2 to 3 years, and then realized nobody really wanted to sit in the back and stare at somebody's back of somebody's head.
Yeah.
And also, seeing the audience on camera is a good thing most of the time, but you don't always want to see people scratching their head and picking their nose or looking tired backstage, and occasionally you'd see somebody like that. So anyway, we came up with the idea of having the Austin skyline as the backdrop in our 7th season, and we still do. This is the original skyline. The new one, of course, is at the
remember
Moody
that one.
downtown.
I remember we didn't have all the high rises.
We've added a few more buildings to the skyline today. In fact, we probably should even update it again. But what better backdrop than the Austin skyline for Austin city limits? But because of the scale, because of just the juxtaposition of the backdrop and the audience and the cameras, it really does seem like the real deal. And it's surprising how many people, I think, even to this day, really believed that it was outside. Yeah. We did a show a few years ago now, maybe, with Paul Simon, first time he had ever been on ACL, and it was at the new venue at the Moody. And I remember when he walked in for rehearsal, and he kind of walked around to the front of the stage, and he stood there like this. And I walked over to him to introduce myself, and the first thing he said was, you know, I always thought it was in a park. So, hey, we even fooled Paul Simon and millions of other people. KLRU designed this studio, among others, to do large-scale productions. Now, KLRU, when they started, they had no idea that they might do a music show in this room. They thought they would do children's kids shows, ballet, any number of possibilities. It's one reason why they have such a high ceiling in here, to fly in set pieces. But with the Austin music scene exploding, and with Willie Nelson moving to town, which did create quite a fuss, at the time, because he was a big name in Texas, if not in Nashville. And they had 2 people in mind to do a pilot show for this tentative music series. One was Willie, the other was B.W. Stevenson, who was also one of the more prominent
Cosmic
Texas
Cowboy
artists at the
type,
time.
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So BW actually taped a show before Willie did. Now, this is one of those little-known, footnotes. And but they had a hard time getting an audience in. It wasn't really promoted very well, and the show didn't quite turn out the way that they had hoped, the original producers. And this was before my time. But so then they got Willie in here. Willie was certainly well-known enough and generated enough excitement that they were able to fill up the room. And that original show with Willie was in October of 1974. And a lot of people have told me over the years the feeling they get when they walk out on the stage being so solid. A lot of stages are pretty flimsy, like at music festivals. You can kind of feel yourself bouncing up and down. This one has earned some creaks over the years. A sure sign of something that's, getting a little along in time. But you just stand here as many times as it's been painted, but you think about the people who have stood on this stage, who have poured their hearts out, played incredible guitar solos, been captured, on video and carried to millions of people around the world to see. It's all happened right here from this spot. You can't stand here without getting that.
I just got chills
feeling.
when you're talking. Yeah, it's definitely got a feel to it when you walk in. And it's to me, it's a little bit of warmth. Even though the temperature's always cold, I feel all cozy and warm inside when I see this.
There is a magic in this room, and people keep using that word over and over again, and it's not a cliche, it's true. The fact that it's such an intimate space, the fact that the acoustics are pristine in here, the way the stage was built to come out into the audience so that people sort of wrap around the sides. And of course, we'd always have an audience either sitting on the floor or standing right in the front. And it's literally like a one step down from here to there.
So close.
Created that chemistry, which helped create that magic, Now when an artist is invited to come and do Austin City Limits, it's like, This is like a career milestone. It's a big deal. So people are on their best behavior, number one, but it seems to bring out the best in people. You can pick any artist, and no matter how good they are, he or she, when they do Austin City Limits, they know it's not just another late night TV show. It's not something that's gonna, be seen and forgotten within a few weeks or months. It's something for the ages, for posterity.
If you enjoyed tonight's Decibel special, be sure to like our Facebook page where we premiere our stories. We also invite you to connect with us by going to our website, decibelatx.org, and sign up for our newsletter. Thanks so much for spending some of your evening with us. Look for Decibel every month here on KLRU. Our stories are rooted in the PBS mission to educate, inform, and inspire. Good night.
Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.